Favourite players from the Southern Hemisphere, folks. We had a look at the Northern Hemisphere the other day, and I could think of a few players that I remember watching fondly. Not so many that I remember disliking, because I don't think I remembered watching the All Blacks play those teams that often. That kind of absence of frequency meant there wasn't as much kind of dislike, but certainly for Australia, who used to beat us a fair bit, and South Africa used to beat us enough that I could remember guys that I didn't like from those teams. But we'll go through the ones that I liked and a few that I didn't like from each of these countries, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. All Blacks, guys, the list is extensive. Obviously, I grew up as a kid watching the All Blacks. Grant Fox was one of my favourites. He played for Auckland. Zinzan Brook. He also played for Auckland. The Wetton brothers, they played for Auckland and the All Blacks. Michael Jones. All of these guys, mainly that kind of generation of Auckland talent, right up until the Blues, kind of 96, 97, Sean Fitzpatrick, all those guys who played in that era. Those are the guys I grew up watching. Those are the guys who I would have recognised. I probably didn't care about any other teams, be it from elsewhere in New Zealand or whatnot. Those were the guys that were my heroes, and I watched playing week in, week out, and that I certainly were the most familiar with as a child. Guys that I didn't like from New Zealand, this is a favourites list, but I'm going to put a dislike guy. Richard Lowe. I couldn't stand Richard Lowe because he didn't play for Auckland. He played for Waikato, and then I think also Canterbury, who are two of Auckland's rivals. And he was a dirty bugger, man. One of the dirtiest players in the rugby field. Real hard man. Different era of rugby. You could get away with a lot more back in those days, but geez, you wouldn't want to cross that guy, even now that he's in his 60s. Aussie players that I liked, weirdly enough, I think Nathan Sharp is probably the guy that I was most fond of. I think probably because it's a bit of an underdog story. I think by the time Nathan Sharp came along, the All Blacks were probably getting the better of the Wallabies by that point. Like the previous generation, like the John Eales kind of generation, used to beat the All Blacks a bit more, I think, than Nathan Sharp's generation. And he played for the Force for much of his career. So I didn't play for the Reds, but yeah, the Force were always a bit of an underdog story, never knocking my Blues out the playoffs kind of thing. So yeah, Nathan Sharp also always seemed like a bit of a workhorse player and a good team man. So yeah, he was probably my favourite Aussie player, actually, weirdly enough. Didn't mind Clyde Rathbone either. Yeah. South African player, maybe it's also a bit of the kind of underdog thing, and this is going to be a weird choice, but Andre Pretorius, is that how you spell his name? I don't know why I like that guy, but he was a proper... He wasn't like the stereotypical South African. He wasn't like a Mornay Steyn 10. He's probably a little bit more attacking minded, a little bit less reliable from the boot. But I used to love watching Andre Pretorius play, especially when he played for the Cats. This may have been me going through some kind of rebellious rugby phase where I was, really getting into my rugby, and I wanted to just watch. I wanted to watch rugby that other people in New Zealand weren't watching, so that I could spout some stats probably. And I used to sit up and watch the games that the Cats were playing in the middle of the night. I was probably not successful many of the times. I remember setting an alarm at my parents' house to watch the Cats games on, which were in the middle of the night, and because Andre Pretorius would often be playing, and they would often lose. They would get pumped because they weren't a particularly good team, but then sometimes I would sleep through it. I remember I would wake up and then fall back asleep. But yeah, I distinctly remember watching Andre Pretorius. Like I would say Habana, but he's more like my own age. So he wasn't like a guy that I kind of looked up to kind of in that regard. He was a guy I would have admired, it's a guy my own age. He's more like the kind of Dan Carter generation. But I think Andre Pretorius and Nathan Sharp are probably a few years older than myself anyway. But yeah, Andre Pretorius. I didn't really like Bucky's Borta, and I didn't like Victor Matfield because they disrupted the heck out of the All Blacks line-out. Yes. I also didn't like George Gregan a lot. Again, probably because he beat the All Blacks a lot. So those guys, often the ones you don't want to see playing are the ones that are really good. So yeah, guys like Gregan and Bucky's and Victor didn't really like seeing the All Blacks come up against them. Obviously, respect them because, geez, they're good players. But yeah, didn't like them because they were often better than the equivalent guy the All Blacks had in the same position. Hopefully that's not George Gregan giving me a call. Right, players from the Pumas. Again, the Pumas didn't really beat us back in the day. They do now, but the current coach of the Pumas, Felipe Contepomi, pretty good player. I remember him being part of the 2007 Rugby World Cup squad, and watched him boss the team around the park. So he was certainly always a guy I admired. And from Fiji, there's one man, would be Rupini Thautau Mbuka. He was absolute lightning. I think he played, was it one season with the Blues? And he had that incredible World Cup. He was just unbelievable. Express pace. Unbelievable speed. I don't know if we've ever seen something quite like that again. He was just such an elusive runner. Very, very fun guy to watch. So there you go. There's a list of some guys that I admired when I was watching rugby as a younger man. There's certainly more, and a few that I can dislike off the top of my head. But yes, you guys let us know your thoughts. Any Kiwis that you disliked or particularly admired? I mean, I would say Dan Carter and those guys, but again, they're more like my own generation. So I was more thinking about the guys from when I was a fair bit younger. But anyway, you guys take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.